Science on Surfaces.
Hello there and welcome to this podcast, Science on Surfaces Tips, Tricks and Tools, with me, Malin Edvardsson. In today's episode, we will talk about surfactants, surfactant characterization, and we'll also take the opportunity to talk to our guest about his career path from a PhD to a postdoc, and from where he then moved on to take jobs in industry. So here with me in this call, I have Dr. Fredrik Andersson, scientist and project leader at Agriculture and Food for Nouryon Performance Formulations. Welcome, Fredrik.
Hello, nice to be here.
Nice to have you here. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. Working from home in these strange times, but all is good.
Strange times indeed. So I'm very much looking forward to hear about your career path and why you chose a career in science and what inspires you with this kind of job. But let's start with your current position. So you're a scientist and a project leader. So what is it that you do?
Well, my role is a bit of a mix then of actually being the scientist in the lab, which I like a lot as well, but then also running the kind of stage-gated projects in a project leader kind of way. So two very different roles combined into one. But I like to have both actually. I become easily bored otherwise, but yeah.
So what is the science that you do?
The science is, Nouryon, where I work, we work with surfactants and also with polymers quite a bit actually. So, the main thing is, of course, that they interact with surfaces. So, they lower surface tension, as you know, surfactants, and they are in a wide range of applications. So we serve a lot of different applications with our products.
So what is it that you would like to achieve with the products? To be more specific, you do some development work.
Yeah,
right?
It's either developing new surfactants or polymers, which is quite a task because you start doing it in the synthesis lab, which I don't do, but we have groups for that, and then we characterize them in the application lab, and from that it's then to introduce a new chemical into the market, which is quite a fun process, but it's also quite a lengthy process when it comes to registrations and HSE, for example, as well. So, but we also use current products that we have in one application. Let's say hairstyling application can be used in a different application within Nouryon. So we also broaden the way that we use our current products.
So how does that work to develop a new surfactant or a new polymer? Do you know of a need? It should behave this way or that way?
Yeah, normally it is, we know what it's supposed to do in the application. And then, of course, we have a lot of knowledge, structure-wise of surfactants that have worked similarly. But then maybe there is a need for having biodegradation, maybe it's a need for bio-based and so on. And then we have to take that into account as well. So we know what we want to achieve, and then we go back, we start in the synthesis lab then trying to make these molecules. And it's a lot of tweaking and it's a lot of trial and error actually before you reach final working product.
So how long could it take then to develop a new surfactant for a specific application?
I think, we have long-term R&D projects are normally 2 to 3 years, and I think that's the minimum time because you need to do the testing and you need to, as I mentioned again, the registrations, for example, within REACH, and also and those are quite lengthy processes. So I would say 2 to 3 years normally.
So it's not just that you can I want a surfactant that's doing this, and then you go into the lab and you make it.
No, but that's the first part. If it doesn't perform, then we will not take it further, right? So so that's the first and maybe the most fun part, and then comes the other part that is also needed, but it's a different kind of ballgame.
Okay, so let's say that you're developing a new surfactant. What kind of information do you need during that project, or a product development, the characterization throughout the whole development part, so to say?
I mean, I think when you develop a surfactant, you first do the molecule, and then, of course, you do the basic surfactant characteristics. I mean, as you know, you can measure the CMC value, you can measure surface tension, both static and dynamic, for example. Then it can also be, if it's supposed to bind to surfaces, you can do interactions with surfaces. Yeah, so basic surfactant characteristics. I mean, and then you need to test it in the application itself, whether that is for hairspray or whether that is for Aggro crop protection or whatever it might be. You need to do, for example, field studies or these kind of things as well.
So what methods is it that you use? Basically, it's just like a handful of methods that you need then.
You mean for the surfactant characteristics?
For the characteristics, yes.
Yeah, then it's a standard, I mean, tensiometry. You can measure foaming, you can measure, I mean, interaction with it's like a typical sort of OECD method for characterizing surfactants in a sense.
And for those who don't know what those are.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I mean, tensiometry, contact angle, QCMD, for example, can also be used. Those kind of things, yeah.
Okay.
But the application is different than you try it in the application afterwards.
Okay, so what could
performance.
Okay.
That could be, for example, if you work with hairspray, it can be, I mean, does it have a curl retention on the hair strand? Does it work to increase the absorption of the pesticide onto the leaf if it's Aggro? So that's the sort of specific test it needs to pass to be able to go forward as a product in a certain area.
That sounds much more challenging to assess.
Yeah, we have in-house methods, but of course it's in-house methods, and then it's also actually working with external collaborators that might want to use it in the end, right? Because it's but it's
like for example, what you mentioned with the pesticide. How would you go about testing that?
That's, I mean, the pesticide, we can do that, for example, in-house. You have something called the front cell study, which is where you can see how well the pesticide is penetrating a membrane, and then you analyze the analytes that come through, and then you can see, does it actually increase when you add the surfactant or not? Because we wanted to boost the absorption or the penetration through the membrane. So we have those methods set up for those specific tasks.
But what would you like to achieve? Would you want the surfactant to basically coat the leaves or the?
For this kind of application that I work with now, so Aggro application, then we want the surfactant to be an adjuvant, and an adjuvant is basically, you would say, something that is enhancing the efficacy of the pesticide. So that can be by increasing penetration through the leaf membrane. It can increase the humidity or humectancy of the wax, so it swells, and then the pesticide penetrates. You don't want it to form. You don't want it to form necessarily a thick layer, but you want it to modify the wax, for example, of the leaf, so it eases, for example, penetration.
Okay.
But you don't want it to do too much, so you get phytotoxicity, so that you kill the plant. So it's a balance. Yeah, you still want green plants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned some challenges here characterizing this product in the application. I mean, are there other challenges in the product characterization? I mean, what's difficult with this development work that you're involved in? Are there any challenges?
Yeah, there are only challenges, I would say.
Only challenges. Okay.
No, there are rewards as well, of course. But I think, I mean, unless you get, I mean, when you make the molecule itself structurally, of course, if you don't get it right with the hydrophobic part and the hydrophilic part, then it will not have the performance that you hope, and then you need to go back and retweak it. So I think the first sort of synthesis step is always maybe not difficult to make a molecule, but to make one that is working in the manner that you want is a challenge. Yeah.
And then, is that the most difficult part of the development then, or?
I would say so, but
Yeah.
but then also actually, as you know, there's quite a lot of high demand on chemistry industry to for example, less toxic products and all these things, right? So you might find a product that is very good, but it doesn't have a good biodegradation profile. Then you need to go back and retweak, and we change the molecule so that it's, you know, more easily degraded and still has stability. You know, you don't want it to degrade within 10 days. You want it to be stable enough, but not persistent in the nature. So it's a lot of these, things you need to balance a lot.
Yeah, so there really are optimization in several steps before you have final product.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've touched upon the analytical methods that you use a bit, which is sort of the scientific part of your job, I guess. So let's move on to talk a bit about your career path. So now you work with surfactants and polymers, and if I look at your early publication list, that is much more of a biological character. You had a publication there on Parkinson's disease. It was protein folding or unfolding, and so on. So what was your PhD on?
My PhD was on, I have a PhD in biochemistry, working on protein characterization and protein structure and protein folding, how they reach their, you know, three-dimensional structure and hence become active. So that was my PhD, and also protein degradation in the human cell, how it avoids getting toxic in the cell, for example. So very different. You're right. Yeah. The only time I used surfactants was when I wanted to solubilize things. So that's my only connection with surfactants before joining AkzoNobel or Nouryon.
But then before that, you did a postdoc at Cambridge. Was that also more of a biological?
Yeah, it was
character?
a biological. It was in the chemistry department in Cambridge, and then it was also there was protein folding when it comes to there's something called protein folding diseases like Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease. So it was characterizing those kind of proteins and how they mutated to form these aggregates you get in your brain when you become when you get dementia, for example. So very different. But I mean, the reason I got into science is because I like biology. I think that's my originally my big passion.
So, I mean, did you always know that you would go into science even as a kid?
No, definitely not. I never did my homework. I never did anything.
Okay.
So I was a bit of a I was a bit of a late bloomer, I would say, when it comes to being productive and doing those kind of things. So up until I was maybe 12, 13, it was not in the cards for me. But then something switched, I think, and I got really interested in mathematics and chemistry and biology, and so a late bloomer, I think. But after that, I think it was quite clear.
And then what? I mean, during your PhD and your postdoc, did you have a plan then moving forward? I mean, did you know that you would leave academia, or did you consider staying on and becoming a professor?
I actually, when I was going home from Cambridge, I applied for some FOAS positions and all these things. And but as you know, it's very competitive, and I didn't get it actually. And so then I think by chance went into industry. But I think I actually enjoy it a bit more now that I've been here for 10 years or a bit more, because you have an end goal and you can really. What is driving me, I think, is, I mean, it's not necessarily all the details in the structures and so on, but I want to see like a timeline how to achieve a product, and I want to see that product be sold and so on. So I think it suits me better, to be honest.
So you don't really regret?
No.
Your choice.
I can miss, of course, being able to design your own experiments, and you don't have the same kind of deadlines and everything. But I think the positives are outweighing the negatives.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit more about what drives you. You said to have, so to see progress.
Yeah, to see like a sequential. I mean, some people, for example, that I talk to at work now, they are really, oh, I love to start things, but then in the end they don't really care about finishing it. They love to start it, or some like to go into the details and so on. And I think I'm a bit of everything there actually, because I like to start things, but if I don't see it progress, then I lose interest. So I want to take it to the next step. I think it's somehow a competitive edge that I want to take it to the final launch or whatever it might be. That's.
So how was that when you were in academia? Of course, then I mean you publish, but then I find that projects could sometimes be very lengthy and run for years, and perhaps it never really ends, but they go, from this publication to that on a similar topic.
I think the publication was my launch, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's what I strived for in a sense. But you're right. I mean, I don't mind long projects as long as I see some progress. Yeah. But the papers were my driving force in a sense.
So what about the problem-solving aspect? Is that important for you at all?
Yeah, yeah, it's fun and it's important, but I'm not one of those people that sits in their chamber for 3 months before testing things. I think about the things I want to try, and then I go and try it, and if it doesn't work, I choose a different path. Again, because I want to go forward, I think. So a bit impatient, but I think sometimes that is quite good. Yeah, because it allows you to go ahead in a sense. But I don't mind to have people in my team that actually are much more in depth than me. I think that's perfect. Yeah,
because you mentioned that it's all challenges.
yeah.
And
a lot of challenges. Yeah,
a lot of challenges. So I was thinking that you need to be, I guess, inspired or motivated by taking on these challenges and solving all these problems.
Yeah.
Instead of being worn down by them.
Yeah, and that's a challenge as well. I mean, it's. But I think a lot of project work is about communication, and I think that's part is quite fun as well. That you can always solve things by communicating better with your team members and so on, and that's one part I like as well.
Okay, so what's your plan moving forward? Do you have a plan, or to go by inspiration?
It's a very good question, because if you look at if you say career, I don't like to use that word, but I mean, then it's a bit schizophrenic. Because I've been in sales, I've been in quite heavy R&D in academia, and I've been in heavy R&D also in industry. So it's it's a bit difficult to know how I would go forward, if I will continue with the scientist kind of pathway, or if I will go into. I can think, for example, marketing can be quite nice as long as it's technical marketing, for example, and also writing and communicating. So at this point, I don't really know actually, but I want it to be coupled to science. I think that's my driving force.
Okay. So I think we will end with that, science being a driving force.
Okay.
That's a good end.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for listening to this episode with me, Malin Edvardsson, and Dr. Fredrik Andersson from Nouryon. And I would also like to take the opportunity to mention to those of you who are listening or watching that if you're interested in surface science or related topics, you should check out our blog, the Surface Science blog. Thank you and take care.